My name is Wendy. I'm 34, a CPA, a mother of two, and 3 weeks ago, my own father told 2,400 people that he was disowning me. He didn't call me first. He didn't sit me down. He wrote a Facebook post at 11 o'clock at night, and by the time I woke up the next morning, my in-laws had seen it. My children's teachers had seen it. The entire congregation at Grace Fellowship Church, all 800 members, had seen it. My phone didn't stop ringing for a week. My 8-year-old daughter came home from school crying because a classmate told her that her mommy got kicked out of her family. And the worst part? The post never said why. It just said I brought shame to the Braddock name and asked that no one contact me on their behalf. So the whole town filled in the blanks themselves. But here's the thing my father didn't know. While I was falling apart, my husband Marcus was sitting in our kitchen every night after I went to bed, quietly pulling public records. And what he found about a charity, a dead company, and $185,000 missing dollars, well, it changed everything. What Marcus did with that information at my father's own charity gala, even Dad never saw it coming. Before I go any further, if this story speaks to you, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with what you hear. And while you're at it, drop a comment with where you're listening from and your local time. I'd love to know. Now let me take you back 5 weeks. To the Sunday afternoon, my mother asked me for a small favor. You need to understand Collinsville, North Carolina, to understand my father. It's the kind of town where everyone knows your last name before they know your first. Where who you sit with at church on Sunday says more about you than your tax return. And in Collinsville, the Braddock name, my maiden name, was currency. My father, Gerald Braddock, was senior vice president at First Regional Bank. He was a church elder at Grace Fellowship, this gorgeous old granite building with stained glass windows and a congregation of about 800. And for the past 15 years, he'd been the executive director of the Braddock Family Foundation, a 501c3 that gave scholarships to underprivileged teenagers. That last one was his crown jewel. Every year at the annual gala, he stood up in his Brooks Brothers suit, his Rolex date just catching the overhead light, and he talked about legacy and giving back until people cried. Then they wrote checks. He drove a black Cadillac Escalade that he always parked in the first spot at the church lot, not because it was reserved, but because nobody would dream of taking it. People called him Mr. Braddock even at the grocery store. He shook hands with both of his, the way politicians do, firm on the outside, deliberate underneath. And here's what you need to know about Gerald Braddock as a father. He believed in hierarchy. Men lead, women support. Sons carry the name forward. Daughters? Daughters were something he never quite figured out what to do with. Everyone in Collinsville believed Gerald Braddock was the finest man they knew, the most generous, the most principled. Everyone was wrong. I grew up in the shadow of a son my father always wished had come first. Tyler, my younger brother, is 29 now, 5 years behind me in age, a lifetime ahead of me in Dad's estimation. When Tyler graduated high school, average grades, no honors, Dad paid his full tuition at State for a business degree. When I graduated 2 years before him, summa cum laude, full academic load, part-time job at a tax office, Dad offered me a loan, not a gift. A loan, with interest, documented on paper. I paid off that student debt over 8 years, and I never once brought it up at family dinners. Not once. Tyler got a job at First Regional Bank right out of college, not because he earned it, because Dad made a call. He sat one cubicle over from Dad's corner office, and everyone on that floor knew exactly why he was there. Me? I passed the CPA exam on the first try. I got hired at Henderson and Shaw, a small accounting firm in town. When I told Dad over the phone, there was a pause, and then he said, "Accounting? That's just counting other people's money, sweetheart." When I married Marcus, a civil engineer at Morrison Engineering, steady, smart, devoted, Dad pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner and said, "Well, at least you found someone willing." He said it like he was being generous. Marcus heard it. He didn't say anything that night. But I saw the way his jaw tightened around his Seiko watch strap when he took it off before bed. Still, I kept trying. I called Dad every Sunday. brought the kids to his house on holidays, helped set up chairs for church fundraisers. For 34 years, I tried to be the daughter he wanted. I didn't realize he never wanted a daughter at all. He wanted silence. It started with a phone call on a Sunday afternoon in early March. Mom, Diane, called me while I was folding laundry. Her voice was soft, the way it always got when Dad wasn't in the room. Wendy, honey, the gala's coming up in a few weeks, and I need to pull together the financial reports for the board. Could you come by and help me sort through some of the foundation files? You're so much better at this than I am. I said yes without thinking. That was my pattern. Mom asks, I show up. I drove over to the house that afternoon while Dad was at the golf course with his usual foursome. The Escalade wasn't in the driveway, and I remember feeling a small, stupid relief at that. Mom led me into Dad's home office, the inner sanctum. Dark oak desk, leather chair, brass lamp, framed photos lining the shelves. One of them showed Dad shaking hands with the governor at some fundraiser. Another showed him receiving a Rotary Club award. The whole room smelled like furniture polish and self-importance. She handed me 2 file boxes and opened Dad's old laptop to an Excel file. These are the past 2 years of foundation expenses, she said. I just need everything organized so Mr. Kessler and the board can review it before the gala. I sat down and started going through the entries. Vendor payments, facility rentals, scholarship disbursements, printing costs, standard nonprofit stuff. Everything looked normal, clean, routine. And then my fingers stopped on the keyboard. There it was. One line among dozens. Meridian Consulting Group, $14,200. No contract reference, no project description, just consulting fee. I didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But something about the way that number sat there, too round, too clean, tucked between legitimate expenses like a forged signature hidden in a stack of real ones, made the CPA in me go very, very quiet. I told myself it was probably nothing. Dad had run the foundation for 15 years. Consultants come and go. Maybe Meridian did strategic planning, or donor outreach, or some other service I wasn't aware of. But then I scrolled further. Meridian Consulting Group, $8,600. March of the prior year. Same vague consulting fee description. No deliverables listed. I kept scrolling. Another one, $11,400. Then $6,200. Then $6,600. 6 payments across 2 years, totaling just over $47,000, all to the same vendor, all with the same generic label. I pulled up the records for other vendors, Kessler Printing, which did the gala programs, Collinsville Events Company, which handled catering. Both had line item breakdowns, quantities, unit costs, delivery dates, invoice numbers, normal, professional, everything you'd expect from a well-run charity. Meridian had none of that. It was the only vendor with no supporting documentation at all. I sat there for a moment, listening to the grandfather clock tick in the hallway. Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. I could hear her humming something faintly. An old hymn, I think. I opened my phone and took screenshots of all 6 Meridian entries. I don't know why exactly. Professional instinct, maybe. Or maybe some part of me that had spent 11 years reconciling other people's books knew the difference between an oversight and a pattern. I told myself I'd ask Dad about it. Casually. Just to understand. After all, this was his foundation. His life's work. Surely there was a simple explanation. I didn't know that the screenshots I'd just taken would become the first piece of ammunition in a battle I hadn't yet realized I was fighting. I called Dad the next evening after putting the kids to bed. I kept my tone light, conversational. The way you do when you already know the answer might be a problem, but you're praying it won't be. Hey, Dad. So I was helping Mom organize the foundation files, and I noticed a few payments to a vendor called Meridian Consulting Group. I don't see a contract for them in the records. Can you fill me in? Just want to make sure everything's tidy before the board reviews. 3 seconds of silence. I counted. Then his voice came through, and it was the voice I'd been hearing my entire life whenever I stepped too close to something I wasn't supposed to touch. Cold. Controlled. When exactly did I ask you to audit my foundation, Wendy? You didn't, Dad. Mom asked me to organize the... I know what your mother asked, and I'm telling you right now, you are an accountant at a strip mall firm. Don't confuse that with being qualified to question my foundation. The words landed the way he meant them to, like a door slamming shut. I felt something small and familiar curl up in my chest. I was 8 years old again, standing at the edge of the dining room, being told to go play because the adults were talking. Don't touch those files again, he said. Give everything back to your mother, and do not discuss this with anyone. Are we clear? Yes, Dad. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, phone still warm in my hand. Marcus was brushing his teeth in the bathroom. He came out, looked at my face, and said nothing. He just sat down next to me. And then, faintly, just before I'd hung up, I'd heard Dad's voice shifting. Not talking to me anymore. Talking to someone else in the room. 3 words, clipped and urgent. We have a problem. Over the next 2 weeks, the temperature around me dropped. Slowly, then all at once. Tyler called first. His voice was different. Not the careless little brother tone I was used to, but something harder, borrowed. Dad told me you've been snooping through Foundation records. What exactly are you trying to do, Wendy? Destroy this family? I told him I wasn't snooping. I was doing what Mom had asked me to do. He cut me off. Just stay out of it, seriously. You don't understand how things work. Then Aunt Ruth, Dad's younger sister, canceled our Saturday lunch. She texted a single line. Something came up. Rain check? She never rescheduled. Mom was the one that scared me most. She stopped answering my calls. My texts went from warm to brief to nothing. Busy today. Talk later. Then just silence. I could see the read receipts. She was opening every message. She just wasn't replying. It took me a few days to understand what was happening. Dad was telling people his version first. I pieced it together from fragments. A cousin's awkward pause on the phone. A church friend who suddenly couldn't meet for coffee. Gerald Braddock was walking through his circle with a careful, wounded expression, telling anyone who'd listened that his eldest daughter was going through something, that she was paranoid, that he was worried about her. He wasn't angry, he was performing grief, and it was working. One night, after the kids were asleep, I told Marcus what I'd been noticing. The pulled-back invitations, the changed tones, the silence from my own mother. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I didn't fully appreciate at the time. Your dad's not upset, Wendy. He's strategic. There's a difference. He was right. But neither of us knew the strategy was only halfway done. 2 days later, Dad invited me to the house. Come by after work. We should talk. I went alone. Marcus offered to come, but something told me this was the kind of conversation Dad would only have without witnesses. The living room was staged like a courtroom. Dad sat in his armchair, leather, high-backed, positioned under the brass reading lamp like a throne. Tyler was on the sofa across from him, legs crossed, arms folded. The Tiffany lamp on the side table cast warm light across them both, turning everything golden and important-looking. Mom was nowhere in sight. I heard faint sounds from the kitchen, a cabinet closing, water running, but she didn't come out. On the mantel, the family portrait caught my eye, the one taken 3 Christmases ago. I noticed with a cold little jolt that it had been shifted, pushed to the far corner, half behind a candlestick. Dad didn't stand. He just looked at me. This is my family, he said. That foundation is my legacy. You will not say a single word about what you think you saw, to anyone, ever. He paused. Do you understand? Dad, if there's nothing wrong, then why? Because I said so. He leaned forward. I'm giving you an opportunity, Wendy. A last one. Tyler uncrossed his arms just long enough to add, Just drop it, Wendy. You're embarrassing yourself. I stood there for what felt like a full minute. Then I said something I hadn't planned. I didn't say I was going to tell anyone, Dad. I asked you a question. The fact that you can't answer it tells me everything. Nobody spoke. I turned around and walked out the front door. My hands shook the entire drive home. I gripped the steering wheel of my old Honda Accord so hard my knuckles went white. And I didn't know, I truly didn't know, that in 72 hours, my father would go nuclear. Monday morning, 6:45 a.m. I was pouring coffee, packing Emma's lunch, shouting at Noah to find his left shoe. Normal. Routine. The kind of morning you don't remember unless something explodes in the middle of it. My phone buzzed on the counter. Then again. Then again. I ignored it. Kids first. But when I finally picked it up at 7:15, I had 14 text messages, 6 missed calls, and a screenshot from my coworker Janet that made my vision go white at the edges. It was a Facebook post, from my father's personal page, written at 11:07 the night before. It is with deep sadness that Diane and I must share this publicly. We are officially disowning our eldest daughter, Wendy. She has brought profound shame to our family name. We ask that you do not contact her on our behalf, and we request privacy during this painful time. I read it 3 times. My hands were steady the first time, shaking by the third. The post had already been shared into the Grace Fellowship Church Community Group, 600 members, into the Collinsville Elementary Parent Group, where Emma's teachers and classmates' parents gathered to share bake sale schedules, into the Collinsville Community Forum, where half the town lurked. Tyler's name was on every share. He'd posted at midnight, 30 minutes after Dad. Within 12 hours, 2,400 views, 340 reactions, 89 comments. I scrolled through them with numb fingers, praying for the Braddock family. It takes courage to make this stand. So sorry, Gerald. Some children just don't appreciate what they're given. What did she do? That was the genius of it. He didn't say what I'd done. He left the accusation shapeless, and the town poured its worst assumptions into the mold. I could see the speculation forming in real time. Affair, drugs, theft. Nobody guessed the truth, because the truth was the one thing Gerald Braddock could not afford to have anyone ask about. 2,400 people. That's not a family disagreement. That's a public execution. And the executioner? He timed it for when I'd be too busy making school lunches to notice. The first call from the school came at 9 a.m. Mrs. Offield, this is Principal Davies. We wanted to let you know that a social media post has been brought to our attention by several parents. We're not making any judgments, of course, but we wanted to check in. Is everything safe at home for Emma and Noah? Safe. She was asking if my children were safe. Because my father wrote a Facebook post, I said yes, everything was fine, my voice hollow enough that I'm sure she didn't believe me. But she let it go. For now. Emma came home that afternoon and went straight to her room. When I found her, she was sitting cross-legged on her bed, still wearing her backpack. Her eyes were red. "Mommy," she said, and her voice was so small. "Jake told everyone that Grandpa kicked you out of the family because you're a bad person. Am I a bad person too?" I held her. I couldn't speak for a while. Marcus's mother, Margaret, called that evening. She didn't mince words. "Marcus, I don't care what that man posted. Wendy is my daughter now, but you need to fix this. Whatever is happening, you fix it." At work, people were careful around me. Janet brought me coffee without being asked. My boss, Paul, called me into his office and closed the door. "Wendy, I don't want to get involved in family matters, but I have to be transparent. 2 clients mentioned the post this morning. They're asking questions." That night, I sat in our little 3-bedroom rental at the kitchen table under the overhead light, and I felt the walls close in. Not because of anger, because of something worse. The slow, suffocating realization that I had been publicly defined by a man who wouldn't even tell people what I'd done. My reputation was gone. 12 hours. That's all it took. But Marcus? Marcus was already counting backward from something I couldn't see yet. For the next several days, my world got smaller. I called Mom 6 times. No answer. I texted, "Mom, please call me. I don't understand what's happening." Read, no reply. The next morning, "I love you, please." Read, nothing. Then Dad posted again, not a statement this time, a family photo. Him, Mom, Tyler, Tyler's girlfriend. Sunday brunch at the country club. Linen napkins, mimosas, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Caption, "Family is everything. Hold your loved ones close." I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't been invited. 800 likes. One by one, familiar faces drifted away. 3 women from my small group at church unfriended me on Facebook. I noticed because their names vanished from my birthday list. A neighbor I'd exchanged cookies with every Christmas for 5 years nodded at me across the produce aisle and kept walking. My phone, which had rung non-stop for 3 days, went quiet in a different way now. The silence of people who've decided you're not worth the awkwardness. I tried once to defend myself. I left a comment on Dad's original post. "Dad, can we please talk about this privately? I don't understand why." He deleted it in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Which meant he was watching. Tyler called me one last time that week. "You brought this on yourself, Wendy. Dad gave you a chance and you chose to be difficult. Don't call Mom again. She doesn't want to hear from you." I sat in my car outside the grocery store for 20 minutes that afternoon, gripping the steering wheel, crying so hard my chest hurt. And I thought, maybe Tyler's right. Maybe this is what I deserve for asking a question no one wanted answered. But then I noticed something. Mom's text messages. She'd read every single one. Every one. She wasn't ignoring me by choice. She was being watched. The following Sunday, Gerald Braddock stood up during the prayer request portion of the service at Grace Fellowship Church. I wasn't there, but Marcus was. He hadn't told me he was going. He put on a clean button-down, drove his Ford F-150 to the Granite Church on Elm Street, and sat in the last pew on the left, close to the exit, where he could see everything without being noticed. 400 people were in that sanctuary, stained glass throwing colored light across oak pews. The choir had just finished "How Great Thou Art." And then Pastor David Whitmore opened the floor for prayer requests, and my father stood. Marcus told me later that Dad's voice trembled. Not a lot. Just enough. Rehearsed enough to sound unrehearsed. "I'd like to ask the congregation to keep the Braddock family in your prayers," he said. "We're going through the most painful chapter of our lives. When a child chooses a path that wounds the family, it's something no parent is prepared for." He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. Marcus watched from the back as people rose from their seats to embrace Dad. One by one, hands on his shoulders, soft voices. Pastor Whitmore himself placed a palm on Dad's back and said, "We're with you, Gerald." 400 people comforting the man who had publicly destroyed his own daughter. Marcus sat very still through all of it. He didn't react. He didn't confront anyone. He just watched. And he thought. And what he thought was this: a man who is telling the truth doesn't need to perform grief in front of 400 people. A man who is telling the truth doesn't delete his daughter's comments in 3 minutes. A man who is telling the truth doesn't go nuclear when she asks about a consulting invoice. Something was built on bad ground here. And Marcus, a man who'd spent 15 years pouring concrete foundations, knew exactly what that looked like. I need to pause here for a moment. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, there's no way a father would do that to his own child, well, stay with me, because what my husband discovered next changed everything. If you're connecting with this story, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to hear what Gerald Braddock was really hiding behind that Facebook post, subscribe now. Trust me on this one. All right, let me take you back to my kitchen table. 10 days after the post, I was a shell of myself. I'd lost 8 pounds. My sleep came in 90-minute fragments, broken by the phantom buzz of a phone that had mostly stopped ringing. At work, I moved through spreadsheets on autopilot. My fingers knew the formulas even when my brain was somewhere else entirely. One evening, I sat at our kitchen table, that IKEA table Marcus and I had assembled the week we moved in, the one with the wobbly leg we kept meaning to fix, and I held a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Through the back window, I could see Emma and Noah chasing each other around the swing set, laughing, oblivious. Thank God for that. And I thought, maybe I should just let it go. Maybe I should call Dad and apologize, tell him I overstepped. Promise to never mention Meridian or the foundation again. Get my family back. Get my name back. Let my children have a grandfather who actually shows up to their school plays. Was being right really worth all of this? When Marcus came home, I told him, maybe I should just apologize. Get things back to normal. He set his hard hat on the counter and looked at me for a long time. No frustration, no judgment. Just that steady, quiet gaze that made me fall in love with him 10 years ago. "Wendy," he said, "let me ask you something. If your dad had nothing to hide, why did he burn down your reputation in front of 2,400 people instead of just having a conversation?" I opened my mouth, closed it. Peace built on a lie isn't peace, he said. It's a cage. That night, after I went to bed, Marcus stayed up. I heard the faint click of his laptop opening in the living room. He typed one word into the search bar: Meridian. Marcus didn't rush. That's not who he is. He's the kind of man who measures twice, cuts once, and then measures again just to be sure. So he started with me. The next night, after the kids went down, he sat across from me at that same IKEA table and said, "Tell me about growing up with your dad. Not the finances. Him." So I told him. Things I'd never said out loud in a row before. How I won first place at the state math competition in 9th grade, and Dad didn't come. Tyler had a rec league soccer game the same afternoon. Dad sat in the front row. How the night I found out I'd been accepted into the CPA program, I called home bursting, and Dad said, "Well, who's going to cook for you?" How at our wedding reception he stood up with a champagne glass and told 150 people, "Well, at least she found someone willing." Like it was a joke, like I should be grateful anyone wanted me. Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet except for the refrigerator humming. Then he said, "You know why your dad is scared of you, right?" I almost laughed. Scared? Of me? "You're the only person in that family who can read a spreadsheet, Wendy. You're the only one who could catch him." He paused. Then, "I found something tonight. Meridian Consulting Group was dissolved with the state of North Carolina 2 years ago. The company doesn't exist anymore. But the foundation was still cutting checks to Meridian as recently as last month." The weight on my chest, the one that had been sitting there for 10 days, didn't disappear. But for the first time it shifted. While Marcus was pulling threads, Gerald Braddock was winning. He hosted a small dinner at the house the following weekend. 20 people, hand-selected. The Mook Sioux, 2 church elders, a couple of bank colleagues, Aunt Ruth. The kind of evening where wine flows and sympathy thickens. Word trickled back to me through the cracks. Someone told someone who told Janet at work that Dad was recovering, that he was putting the family back together, that everyone admired his strength. Meanwhile, I went to the grocery store and ran into Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor of 5 years, the one I'd baked apple crumble for every December. She saw me from 10 feet away, and I watched her face do this tiny, almost imperceptible thing. A flinch, followed by a polite nod, followed by a shopping cart swerving down the next aisle. At Henderson and Shaw, Paul pulled me aside again. "Wendy, I'm not suggesting anything, but maybe take a few personal days, just until things settle." I stood in the parking lot after that conversation, late afternoon sun slanting across the asphalt, and I felt small, physically small, like the town was a room that kept shrinking, and I was the only one who couldn't find the door. Gerald Braddock believed he had won. The town believed he had won. The church believed he had won. Tyler certainly believed he had won. He'd posted a photo of himself and Dad at the golf course that morning, captioned, "Best mentor a guy could ask for." But in my kitchen that night, at an IKEA table with a wobbly leg, my husband was arranging printouts in 3 neat stacks. Public filings from the IRS, business records from the North Carolina Secretary of State, screenshots I'd taken 5 weeks earlier on a Sunday afternoon. He looked up at me and said quietly, "We have enough to ask the right questions. Now we need the right people to hear them." Here's something most people don't know. If you run a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States, your IRS Form 990 is a public document. Anyone can look it up. It's available on sites like ProPublica's Nonprofit Explorer, free, searchable, and completely legal to access. Marcus found the Braddock Family Foundation's filings in about 4 minutes. He pulled the last 5 years of 990s and started reading. Not the way a casual person would, skimming the mission statement and the big numbers. He read the way I would have, line by line, vendor by vendor. He cross-referenced every payee against the North Carolina Secretary of State's business entity database, which is also public, also free. Meridian Consulting Group, dissolved in 2023. Last active filing 3 years ago. No registered agent. No office address on record. Yet the foundation had paid them $47,000 over 2 years. including 2 payments after the company ceased to exist, but Meridian wasn't alone. Marcus found 2 more vendors with the same fingerprint: Summit Advisory, LLC, $58,000 across 3 years, dissolved 18 months ago. Pinnacle Services Group, $80,400 over 4 years, registered to a P.O. box that also appeared on no other business filing in the state. 3 shell vendors, $185,400, all with the same generic consulting fee description. All signed off by a single person. Every check, every single one, carried only one signature: Gerald W. Braddock. The Foundation's bylaws, available in the 990 attachments, required 2 signatures for any disbursement over $5,000. Dad had been signing a loan for 5 years, and either nobody on the board noticed or nobody dared ask. Marcus sat back in his chair at midnight, his Seiko glinting under the kitchen light, and said to no one in particular, "Your dad's been paying dead companies for 2 years. That's not an oversight. That's a pattern." The next piece came from a name buried in an old 990. Marcus was scrolling through the Foundation's board listings year by year when he noticed something. A woman named Linda Calloway had served on the board for 6 years, and then vanished from the roster 2 years ago. No explanation, no farewell note. She was there in one filing and gone in the next. He found her on LinkedIn, property manager in a town 30 minutes south of Collinsville.